welcome back to the workbench. Today we're going to be building a C32-8 number 6619 here on Conrail. This was kind of an interesting unit. It was wrecked in 1998 and received a little bit of a special cab modification here when it was repaired. It has the little bit different headlight and number board housing. Here's a little picture of what it looked like beforehand, but this is one of the Ballast Express units, and this is the only one that was repainted into the quality scheme before Conrail was split up in '99, and the only one out of all of them that made it back into the quality scheme, for that matter, from the Ballast Express scheme. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on this here, and as you can see here, we're just using this rail power shell. And I like to use an Atlas motor and drive on these. So in order to do that, you have to take and on these rail power shells, they're meant to go on a Athearn style motor and drive with the little nubs on the bottom of the frame there. So I end up cutting those off, and we'll go ahead and we'll start doing some of our detail parts here that come with the rail power shell. Here's some of our little exhaust stack, and then we've got these little pieces that go in by the radiator, etc. This is all stuff that comes with these shells when you buy them. This also has the anti-climber piece head to install there as well. So we're just going to keep on putting on these parts here. You got the little radiator pieces there going in. Those little flat spots that go in the front of the radiator, they're a separate part there. And as you can see, you got to kind of trim up parts and kind of shape up things. These shells are pretty good. Sometimes there's little spots where you gotta kind of fudge them and finesse them a little bit to get them to fit. You know, I got my little file laying there, and we get the old plastic weld out and put it in. I'm not putting the exhaust stack on here because I'm going with an aftermarket one for this one. But here you can see the unique feature of this locomotive was that it was wrecked, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, and it received like the headlight and number board housing from like a Dash 8 cab on it. So what I elected to do with this is we're going to be scrapping the factory cab because I wanted to go with a aftermarket cab with open doors, etc. already on it. So right now I'm starting to kind of take apart this Dash 8 cab here. As you guys kind of tell, you got to kind of cut this whole number board housing out and away from the cab. What I ended up doing was pretty much destroying the entire cab to get this number board housing set off of here, and it takes a lot of time to really cut this down and cut it out of the cab. And then as you can see, I'm filing and I'm trying to get it right, and you get that piece all done there. We have our cab here from High Tech Details. It's a Dash 7 cab, so I'm gonna go ahead and start getting this assembled here and put together, and we'll have that to mount our number board housing onto there. That was another reason I went with this aftermarket cab, is it doesn't have the number board housing already on there, so I wasn't going to have to cut off a number board housing or anything and try and get that all flat. It's a little bit easier when you have one part that already is good to go, that you know everything's going to be flat on, and then you could mount your part that you had to modify onto, if that makes sense. So you're not trying to get two surfaces that weren't perfectly flat. You're already starting off with one surface that's good. And then, as I also mentioned, this High Tech Details cab has separate doors, which is a bit of a plus for me, so I don't have to try and cut out doors and do that whole rigmarole here. That's kind of the way I go after these projects, is you got to make decisions like that, whether it's going to be worth, trying to save $5 or $10 or whatever to make something work, or just take the little bitty path of least resistance there and work with what you got. So here you can see we're doing some more trim up work here on our number board housing. It takes quite a bit of time to really get this trimmed up and perfectly flat, and I just kind of keep having to shave away a little bit and a little bit with the chisel blade there, just to really try and get it as thin and as perfect as I need it. It just really takes a lot of time to get this stuff right. I think this is probably about a half an hour to get all this just right, to get it on the cab. It's sped up here into about 2 minutes, but you really got to take your time when you're doing stuff like this, especially because that's I had to cut up a cab to get that piece, so I don't want to risk ruining it in the process. Now there you can see I'm actually drilling out the marker light holes now. I'm going to go ahead and get those drilled out now. I try to do that kind of stuff before I get it mounted on the locomotive. That way I don't have to worry about busting it off the locomotive. And then our last kind of step of this point is going to be we're going to glue that number board housing to a piece of sheet styrene. And the reason I do that, it's a very, very thin sheet of styrene. I'm doing that because I want a place to mount all my lights to. Once I get this on the front of the locomotive, I want a place to mount my marker light bulbs and LED headlights and all that fun jazz. So went ahead and got that on there. And then too, with the way that this housing sits on the front of the locomotive, this is one of those points where you gotta decide which way you want to go on the road. If you look at the actual new locomotive, the light housings and all that are mounted slightly higher than what I went with in my build, and this is kind of a point of compromise here. I could have mounted it exactly as the prototype would have been, but I would have not been able to light up the marker lights because those would have been hanging out above the top of the cab. So I kind of had to make that compromise there, having them slightly lower but being able to have the working marker lights, and I'm glad I did. It might not look perfect, but I'm glad I did it that way. And here you can see we're doing our Dash 8 exhaust stack, also from High Tech Details. Throwing that on there. And then we're also, now that our cab's a little bit drier, we're going back and I have to actually trim down this cab a little bit because it sits a bit too high on the rail power shell. So what I ended up doing was I ended up kind of test fitting it, and I didn't like how it looked. It was sitting too high because these C32s kind of have that like humpback thing going on to a degree. So with the cab the way it was from the as built, it was kind of sitting a little bit too high to have the proper look. So now I'm just going in and I'm trimming down the bottom very, very carefully here, just a little bit at a time. You could always take off a little bit more, but you can't put it back very easily. Well, you can put it back, I will say that. It's just not very easy. So we want to take our time here and just shave off a little bit at a time, and just kind of keep working at it, shave off some, test fit it, shave off some, test fit it. I think I cut a little bit of me doing this out because it was just getting to be a little bit too long of me shaving down and test fitting, but you guys kind of can get the point from watching this a little bit here, that just take your time and just do a little bit to get that to fit properly. And it never fails, you know. You'll get one side to where it's looking really right, and then the other side's sitting up a little bit too tall, and then you do that side, and then it's sitting too short, and the other side's too tall, and just one of those parts of the project that'll just make you rip your hair out sometimes. But it's all part of the build, you know. All part of the challenge of building your own locomotives and stuff. And it is very, very rewarding in the end, but it can be very, very frustrating in the moment when you're doing it sometimes. And now we're going through and we're actually drilling out, I believe I'm drilling out the wipers here, I'm drilling out my headlight holes right now. And that's where I got to drill out so that I could feed the LEDs through later. Now we're going to do all the wiper blade holes, the mount holes for our wiper blades. We got the little tiny drill bit that I'm sure I'm not the only one that tends to break a boatload of those. We'll go ahead and drill those out before we glue our cab in place here. So we're going to go ahead and get that glued up and on there. Just using that plastic welder cement stuff, whatever brand I had at the time. I don't remember if it was the Micromark stuff or the Plaster Strut stuff, whichever. I just kind of go with whatever I have at the time. And now I'm actually on these rail power shells. The marker lights are actually like a little bubble, so you can paint them and it'll look like a marker light. You guys shave those off first a little bit with the chisel blade, and then you come back with a drill and you could drill out all of your light holes to mount your lights. Kind of one of the things where you come in and you gotta drill out the hole big enough to be able to put the light in, and then you can mount a backing piece of styrene behind that to eventually drill out another very tiny hole to feed the wires for the LED through. And also gotta mount your number board housings on these units. They didn't come from the factory with the number board housing mounted on the back there. So now here I'm doing my little drill holes for all of my grab irons on the front nose. You could see I've actually got another, actually that's an Atlas hood right there to the right of the locomotive cab there. And I just kind of use that as a guide just to get the holes about right for the grab irons. I'm not going to rip my hair out trying to measure and get them exactly in the right place. I just want them to be kind of close, and you could eyeball things like that pretty good when you have one sitting right next to you. So that's kind of the old Steve way of doing it there. We're just going to eyeball it and get, you know, within a close bit of where it should be, and it should look fine. So now we're doing all of our grab irons on the back of the hood here. See some of that excellent camera work I really had at the time I filmed this here. And now we're going to go ahead and we're doing the same. Since I'm drilling little holes, I might as well do the ones on the Details West plow as well. And here you got, you know, these Details West plows are pretty nice, but you do have to kind of trim off some of the flashing stuff. And on these plows particularly, you have to trim them to match the Conrail plows. Any of you that are Conrail guys will know what I'm talking about. Like the little like corner deal for the, like the way they're cut along the edges. I should have put a picture in here with that, but you gotta kind of trim those down. And then of course you can see we're doing our old red paint trick and making our hole guides there on the front so I know where to drill at. And just take a drill bit that's about the size of the plow and go ahead and drill out the holes we marked. And here's the part where we're going to figure out where them holes aren't really that right. So we're gonna have to go ahead and kind of wonk those holes out a little bit till we can get that plow to sit in there just right. I don't know about you guys, I can never get the damn plow on there right. It never fails. I'll line it up perfect, and I got the paint on the back, and then I drill the holes, and then when I put the dang thing on there, it's always a little bit high on one side or a little bit low. Just kind of used to having that happen anymore. But here you can see we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put our grab irons on our plow now. Now, one thing I try to do when I'm working on projects like this is kind of bounce back and forth between working on one thing and another. And the reason I do that is to give time for things like glue to dry, etc. You know, like while we're doing the plow and stuff, the cab is drying, the glue from the cab is drying onto the shell. And then, you know, right now we're doing these grab irons for plow. Well, by the time we go to put this plow on, because we're working on other things, it'll be dried and everything will be good. Now, on these rail power shells, they don't have the proper ratchet style brake assembly that these units had, so you actually have to cut that into the side of the shell. And here you can see me kind of eyeballing that there. I'm literally just eyeballing it, guys. I looked at pictures, I took my hobby knife, I'm sitting there literally just eyeballing the rectangular spot that it should be in. And all I'm doing is just literally just scoring those lines in over and over and over again until I get all the way through a little bit of time. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the blade. I'm just kind of continuously going over those same spots, and that'll eventually get us our hole that we can now see there. And be very careful when you guys are working on that stuff. You can cut your finger pretty easily doing that, so just take your time and let the blade do the work. Now I sourced a ratchet brake assembly from my parts bin, because I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that has a drawer full of scrap shells. And I cut that out of there right there, and then I got that I'm putting some styrene sheet on the back side there, again some just thin styrene, and I'm going to take my little ratchet brake deal, I'm going to put it in there, boom, glue it, boom, we're good, we got that in there. So now for one of the funner parts here, we're actually going to cut all of the steps out of here like an absolute madman. I'm going to cut all the steps out because I got some of them little A-line brass steps. I think they're for a B40-8, if I'm not mistaken. I can't quite remember. I don't think they make ones for C32-8s, and if they do, I don't think I used them here. If they might, though, I can't quite recall. But either way, what I'm doing is I'm cutting out all these plastic steps. I'm trying to leave a little bit of a nub on each side if I can, to try and mount the new steps to. So you guys will kind of see there's kind of those like ugly nubs on the sides there. Those are for when I put the new steps in, so they have something to sit on. You can go without them, but it is an absolute pain in the rear end trying to get those little brass steps to sit in there. And what I like to do when I do these is I'll start at the bottom, work my way up. There you go. We kind of went through that pretty quick because, again, that was one of the things that took forever, but that's what it looks like when it's done. You cut them out, you put them in there. So now we're going to go ahead and while all that stuff's drying, we're going to go ahead and start our disassembly on our motor and drive here. This is an Atlas C30-7 motor and drive, very simple. And we're going to go ahead and start our gutting. As you can see, this one has the quick connects, but I got to cut those off because I'm not going to be reusing those. We're going to be using a ESU Loc Sound decoder in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a very big disassembly here. I'm actually going to take the trucks off, drive shafts, all that fun stuff. And we're going to actually go ahead and we're going to disassemble our trucks here. And to do that, there's like these little tabs on the bottom of the, that hold like the bottom piece onto the truck. You have to pop those. There should be two on each side, like one on the front and one on the back. You got to pop those and get the bottom piece to essentially wiggle free. And then you could pull your sides of your truck apart. Just gotta fiddle with it. They can be a bit of a pain in the rear end, as you guys are seeing right here. This one might be one of the ones that actually has 8, that has 4 on each side. Once we do that, we're gonna get those all popped apart there. And the reason I do this is because I like to paint the wheels, and it's just easier to paint the sides of the wheels and everything when you pull these all the way apart. Now, I didn't show painting the wheels because I think I've beat that to death on this channel enough, the painting of the wheels. But what we are doing here is while we have that apart and our paint's drying, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to solder these wires onto the little truck, the little power pickups there. And the reason I do that's from the factory, these all have like this little plastic clip. And I don't know about you guys, I hate plastic clips. It just feels like something that's going to go bad. So you can go ahead and do that. And while, you know, I'm still waiting for the paint to dry, we might as well do a little bit more work on our trucks here. And this is a great time to add speed recorder cables, add the bearing caps, the exposed bearing caps, I should say, as well as like brake detail and all that fun little jazz. This is a perfect time to do all that, and that's what we're doing here. We're drilling out all the bearings that are closed and adding the exposed bearing caps to them, as well as whatever ones need speed recorders, we're adding those as well while this is all ripped apart. You can do it with it all assembled. It's just it's a lot harder to drill because the when the truck side frame's mounted to the truck, it tends to kind of move around a little bit more, if that makes sense. And I find it much easier to do this while it's all disassembled. So before I start, before I really get into my reassembly here, I'm going to go ahead and put my wheels back in. I'm going to put a little bit of that label oil stuff in there too, just to kind of lubricate everything. And go ahead and put our side frames back together here. And these just go together and they pop back in. As you guys can tell here, I'm kind of fiddling with that, trying to get it right. And of course, you know, in my haste when I did this, I kind of mixed up what went with what. I recommend if you guys are going to take something apart like this, you know, keep the side frames for one side separate from the other, and keep your track frames and all that, so that way you could do that, so you're not fighting with it. But as you can see, we're back together, we're assembled here. Got our put a little bit of lube there. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my brake lines on and the little brake cylinders as well. Now these I chose to do after I got this assembled, because I have a real bad habit of breaking off these little brake cylinders and stuff when I'm trying to put that back together. So we did that after. Again, I'm going to put a little bit more lube in there as I put my drive shafts back in before I put the cover on. I'll put a little lube in there. I'll spin the drive shaft, that way it gets mixed around, and make sure everything gets well lubricated, because I don't want to have to pull this pack apart and lubricate it in, you know, 6 months. So that's all thrown together. And so since all that's done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump back over here to doing a little more work on our shell since things have dried up some. Right now what I'm doing is I'm cutting a piece of styrene to go on the front of it, and we put it on there. Now we're going back and we're drilling out all of our number boards on the rear here. I believe I mentioned earlier, the rear number boards on these units are like a separate piece that you have to glue on. So gotta glue those on, and I gotta come back through and drill them all out like what I would do on like an Athearn model that doesn't have rear number boards that are lit. So go ahead, you drill them out, and then I gotta take the knife and cut them all out. And it's a lot of work, but I just really like having all the lights working. Just a little bit at a time. Again, guys, take your time with this stuff. Don't rush. This is the stuff that, you know, if you get in a hurry, you could screw something up and then you're back to square one. You got to start all over again with the new shell. So We're just going to take our time, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our sheet styrene in the backside to cover up all of our light holes there, so that way we can mount our LEDs to that sheet styrene. So we got to go ahead and put all those in there. Generally I try to do big pieces and get, like, at the very least get the number boards and the marker lights behind one piece, and then all of the headlights will be behind another piece depending on the locomotive. But now we're going to go back through, and since I glued those pieces in there, I got to go through and just re-drill out some of those grab iron holes, because whenever you glue something in like that, it'll kind of, the glue will get in the holes, and then you won't be able to put your grab irons in easily. So now we're going to go ahead and start putting grab irons on. Of course, you got to kind of trim down these grab irons because they can be kind of long. What the heck? What would you want to call those? They're too dang long. I can't remember. They're too long. They'll stick way too far in there, so you got to trim them down, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to work with them, but you got to do it. See, put the one up there on the front of the locomotive. Now here you can see we're being a little bit resourceful and lazy at the same time. I had a -8 nose piece laying around my parts drawer, and rather than try and bend that handrail, I decided, well, I could just use the one off of this. So that's kind of what we went with here. And then I also am using the little sand filler hatch as well. I see I'm drilling a hole out there just to put that right on top there. So we got that on there. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our L-shaped grab irons here for the front of the hood. And this again is another one of them deals where you bend it and then you test fit it, you bend it, you test fit it, you bend it and you test fit it, and then you bend it and you think it's good, you go to put it on there and it ain't good, but you don't care because you just spent, a half hour trying to bend one grab iron. Those always fight me. But here we're putting our little train antennas on the top here. One's for radio, the other one's I think for the EOT device on the rear of the train, I believe. So we gotta get those put on there. We're gonna go ahead and slap our horn on here in the middle of the long hood. Boom, it's on there. And now it should be about time we got our plow put on the front. Well, we test fit our plow on the front. And again, this is where you can see me again trying to get all this on the front right here. Trying to get this plow to fit right. So we got the glue on there. Let's see how we do. Does it see how well it works? But once I get that plow on there, I'll go ahead and I'll put my MUHOSEs in there. I kind of like bend them first and I feed them up through the hole in the plow for them and put them on there. And again, you guys can see I got some -8 parts laying around here I'm robbing parts off of, and here we can see a nice coupler cut bar I robbed off of that to put on there. We're also going to be using the rear drop step. I'm just going to cut it right off of this old shell here I got, as well as I'm going to use that now broken cut lever there we took off the back, but we'll go ahead and we'll glue that on there. We got to drill all the holes for it as well first, of course. So go ahead and put that on there a little bit at a time there, one side at a time. Of course, very carefully trying not to break my drill bit while I'm doing this, because as I mentioned, guys, those little drill bits, I have nothing but trouble with them. Always am breaking those. I think I may have even reused the MUHOSEs off the back of this locomotive here when I did this. So just continuing to get them little bits on there. And now we're finally putting our coupler cut bar on there. I gotta trim off the little nubs that go into the back of the shell, because it's always a bear to get these to fit on there right, especially when you took them off of something else and you don't have the exact perfect holes drilled in the back. And since this one's broken, I elected to just cut those little nubs off and try and get away from trying to make perfect mounting holes for it, and I just kind of glued it on there. That's not really something that's going to get hit or damaged on any, so no need to get too carried away trying to really super get it on there, super get the holes in there for it right. It shouldn't be knocked off or hit off. I've never had an issue with just gluing them on there flat like that, so went ahead and got that on there. Now we're going to go ahead and do our test fitting for our ditch lights and get those mounted up. And again, this just another one of them times where I just use the old red paint and kind of put them up on there and get them more about where I want them, and then I fit them and drill the holes out and prepare to mount them. Now I don't install the ditch light housings now, I just drill the holes for them. And a quick note for any of you out there doing this, make sure you drill a hole for your LED wires as well. You have to drill your mounting holes and then drill another hole next to that for the wiring for the when you put LEDs in these. It just makes life easier down the road. Now for the fun rip your hair out part here. I don't care for the way that the handrails look for the ones from, I think they're from A-Line or from Rail Power, from whoever. The kits that are available to do these handrails, I just think they look terrible. So if it's going to look bad, I might as well DIY it and, you know, at least say that I made it look bad. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to bend my own handrails from some phosphor bronze wire. And what I used for reference here was a -840B shell I had laying around. And that was just kind of to get like the bend angles right for like that mid section where you have the step down midway down the long hood, as well as for like the end of the very end railing at the end of the locomotive, trying to get that bent close. It didn't come out perfect by any stretch. I also used it here, as you guys can see, to get my handrail stanchion sizes right. Now is this like 100% prototypically correct? Probably not, but it looks right, and that's all that really matters to me. So I get my whole long handrail formed and shaped and set up right, and then I come in and I start adding these stanchions, and these are from KV Models. Shout out to them. They built they have some awesome etched detail parts that I really enjoy using. And these handrails are so tricky to do, and they're a pain in the rear end, but they're very durable and they look really good when they're done, even if they're not perfect, because you know, I'm not an expert at doing handrails. I still enjoy how these come out when they're all said and done. So going ahead, we're getting our stanchions on there, and normally what I like to do is I like to do one or two, and then I'll come back in and I'll solder the joints so that way it kind of firms up the wire and keeps it from moving around so much. So I'll do these first couple, and then you'll see me solder them to get them on there a little bit better so they're not wiggling around and shifting around all over the place, because when you don't have these handrails secured, they tend to move around a little bit and they'll want to pop out of the side of the shell. So you can see we're going to go ahead and we're going to solder them in place like so. And that'll kind of firm up that whole area there, and we could go back and we could just kind of keep doing a few of these at a time, working our way down the side of the locomotive here. So I want to say these handrails probably took me 2 hours to do the entire locomotive. I'm just going to show you guys just this engineer side, because again, this is one of the things where it just gets to be a bit too much, even with it sped up. So I ended up cutting out a good bit of this just because it's the same thing over and over again. You shape your handrail, you figure out your stanchion sizes, you fit them on there, you drill a hole to mount the stanchion into, because there's these little nubs on the bottom of the stanchion, and put a little glue on there, put it on the handrail, form the stanchion around the top handrail, the top of the stanchion, and then you solder it. So it's just the same process over and over again, and it's like I've told you guys, it's very challenging, but it's also very rewarding when you get done and you have these, you know, fancy pants handrails that actually look pretty good. Now, the one problem I always run into, and you guys will have to comment down below if any of you that do this kind of work, you always end up with, like, the end always ends up goofy. I don't know why. It just, no matter how hard I try or what I do, the very end of the handrail always ends up bent funny. And it just makes me want to rip my hair out sometimes, but it is what it is. I'm still glad I did it. I still think overall it looks better than those wonky ones that they're like an old blue box style ones. That, I can't remember who the heck makes them though. I just think these look better than those do. So it's a little bit of time, knock them out, and we'll be heading over to the paint booth once this is done. So like I said, guys, I cut a lot of that out because it's just gonna be way too long. So here we are with the paint booth. We're going to go ahead and we've got our scale coat flat black, if it ever focuses. And the reason I go with doing this flat black, and I paint this way is with all the lights and the LED lighting, the black is a nice kind of a light killer essentially. It won't let the light bleed through very easily. So I come in, I hit this thing with the flat black, and then we'll come back and do our blue. Now, so I'm sure some of you noticed there, I started off painting the bottom side first and then flipped the shell over. I recommend if you guys are going to do any painting, make sure you always, if you're not going to start in the bottom, make sure you always paint from the bottom side at some point, or else it's going to look goofy because you're going to have places that the paint can't get to unless you specifically go from the bottom angle. So there's your scale coat blue going on. Look at that blue. Looking good right there. Alright, so now that we got our blue on there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back through and we're going to start doing all of our hand painting work. And this will pretty much consist of, I have to do the top of the short hood in flat black. I also have to do all of the walkways in flat black, as well as the front pilot. I believe the steps as well. I have to see here. But you got to go through and paint all this. I do all this by hand. There's really no good way you could do this with an airbrush, just because, you know, like the handrails are on there permanently. I don't want to be taking them off and trying to put them back on and all that. So I just take my time with a brush and some black acrylic paint and go through here. And any of you out there doing this at home, inevitably, no matter how hard you try and how careful you are, you're going to get some of the black paint on the side of the hood. It happens. I try to keep a Q-tip handy, that way I could wipe it off, and 9 times out of 10 I could get most of it off to where it's not very noticeable. In worst case, if it's still there, I'll just turn it into like a little oil spot at the bottom of a door or something. You know, you gotta take the goof ups and make them into something positive. But here you can see I'm just, you know, throwing some of that black up there on the steps and on the plow and all that on the front, getting all that on there. So just kind of do that. We do that all the way around the locomotive. And then we're going to go ahead and here shortly we'll be doing our white handrail painting. As you can see, we're going to go ahead and paint our walkway. Just going down the side, and there you can see I goofed up and got a little bit on the side of the shell. It happens. Just keep working at it a little bit and keeping a Q-tip around to clean it up whenever I go into the bad spots there. So I'll go ahead and make a note here that this is going to be the last video that I shot like this. I did this video last summer, and I've kind of changed the way I'm filming these how-tos because unfortunately, it works great for when I'm working on stuff because the camera's directly above me, but when it comes to actually watching it, it doesn't turn out too well because you can't see as much. So I changed the way I'm filming things for future videos so that hopefully the be a little bit better, so we're not like having things off the screen like right now. But since you guys can't see it, all I'm doing is I'm doing the white paint on the grab irons on the front, as well as the ends of the handrails and the little white stripes on the steps and the edges of the steps. So just going through and doing all that white painting. You know, like a few grab irons here and there that get it, not all of them. It depends on the locomotive and who worked on it at Conrail at the time that it got painted. So you can see we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our Loc Sound Direct decoder. Yes, that's a direct, guys, a V4 direct on there. And get that mounted. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my little stands for the speaker and Keep Alive, as well as on the front side I actually build a stand to add some weight to. Now the reason I don't go with the factory weights back in these is they just it's kind of one of the things with how they fit in a shell. They take a lot of modification to make them work with these when you're taking these and using them with a different shell than what they're designed for. So rather than spending, you know, an hour or two out in the garage with the grinder trying to grind down the weight to fit right, I elect to just go ahead and build some stands out of sheet styrene and use those to mount my speaker on and everything, and put my, in this case I think I put 3 or 4 little weights in the front side because I had room for it. But I'm not super concerned with how heavy I can make a locomotive. As much as I, you know, love to make them all as heavy as possible, my concern tends to be more of When I'm putting it back together, is there going to be enough room for the wires for the LEDs and for the speaker without it hitting on anything? In the grand scheme of things, I always run 2 to 3 locomotives together, so I'm not really concerned about one being too light or anything, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have plenty of power on every train, so it's not a big deal to me. Here you can see I'm custom building my speaker enclosure from the ESU parts there. Use the plastic cement, and then I use a little bit of canopy glue to actually attach the speaker to the mount. There you can kind of tell there's our weights going on in the front there. It was just kind of luck of the draw that I had room to put those in there. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start adding all of our LEDs into the shell here. And what I did is I saw this little trick. I can't remember where I saw this at, but you take a little bit of shrink tube, you tape it into the shell, and then you feed your wires through that shrink tube. It actually helps to keep your wiring a little bit more organized. So went ahead and did that here. And what I'll do is I'll start off with the headlights. I'll feed both those wires through and in there, and then what I'll do is I'll take a piece of tape and I'll tape those 4 little wires together and label them HL for headlight. That way when I go to wire all this to the decoder, I know what wires are what. Just makes life a lot simpler, so you're not playing the guessing game trying to tell what wires came from where. But I'll always start off with the headlights on each end, then I'll do the number boards, marker lights, and ditch lights will be last, because ditch lights are the farthest downward in a shell, if that makes sense to you guys. So those will always be the last ones I do, but I just, a little bit of time here. And again, taping off the wires and labeling them, so that way I know what's what. Don't start feeding a bunch of wires through and then just trying to assume that you're going to remember that those wires are going to stay in a certain spot or anything. Just label them. It takes all the hassle out of it. So especially on a project like this where we're going to have, oh gosh, how many are we going to have here? 6 LEDs on each end of the locomotive. Well, 8 on the front end because of the ditch lights. Or no, we'll have more. Yeah, we'll have 8. So you're talking, let's see, 16 wires coming from the front end, and gosh, how many would there be? 12 from the back end. So you're talking a lot of wires. My brain ain't working that good this morning, guys. But either way, we got all those wires and they got them labeled. And now I'm going to come back over here to my motor and drive here, and we're going to start soldering some stuff. And I know some folks get a little bit intimidated about doing wiring and stuff, and the one piece of advice I can give you all is just break it down into the simplest parts. I'm not trying to hook up everything at once here. I started off with my truck wires in the front, and I went ahead and attached them. Now I'm doing the ones in the rear. And now you guys can see we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our motor wires here next. We'll do those next. So once we get those motor wires attached, we have a chassis that will move on its own. So we got that part done. Then we'll go ahead and I believe I'll do the speaker next, is what I'll put on here. Yep, I got my piece of tape that I mount my speaker to. And we'll go ahead and mount our wires to our speaker. Now the speakers, when I wire them, I do them in what's called parallel wiring. So on your decoder, you have 2 speaker outputs. We'll call them A and B, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run 2 wires from A. One will go to one speaker and one will go to another. And then I'll run 2 wires from the B on the decoder, and that will go to the other on each speaker. So essentially both speakers are getting the same connection, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't, but either way, now we're going to start chipping away at our wiring here. And again, we're just going to work, a little bit of time here. I'm starting off with the headlight, doing the headlight. Solder the wires together for the headlight. And I'll go ahead and I'll do the ditch lights while I'm up here. And each ditch light gets its own auxiliary. So auxiliary 1 and 2 are each going to be 1 ditch light. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our rear light. So we'll go ahead and do the 2 blue wires for the rear go together. The 2 red light wires go together. The blue goes to the actual rear light labeled spot, and the red will go to what's called the U plus or the common. So now we're going to go ahead and we're doing the number boards. Put all those wires together. And then we'll do the marker lights as well. Like I said, guys, it looks like a lot, but if you just break it down and you do, just do your headlights first,
ditch lights, rear lights. If you break it up and you just do things a little bit at a time, it's really not as intimidating as what it might seem like it is. You just gotta break it down, take your time. If you just look at it as like, oh my gosh, I got 20 LEDs in here and all these wires, just break it down, take your time, don't rush it. But there you can see we got that all together. Went ahead and put our chassis back on our shell. Everything's good. I went over and track tested it. I forgot to film that, of course. But we're gonna go ahead and start our decaling. Literally, this is just using the micro scale decals, and there's no real secret to decals other than the fact that I just have a bunch of the micro scale decal sets, and I just use the decals that look right for whatever project I'm working on. In this case, we have the quality logos going on there, and the big decals I'll soak in water, as well as like the nose and the nose logos and stuff I'll soak in water. But for like the little decals, I'll use the Micro Sol, I think it is, or Micro Set. It's the blue bottle of the micro scale stuff. The red stuff I'll brush on before I put the big decals on, and then the blue stuff's the stuff I use for the small decals. I'll just let them soak in it and put them on there. But again, just take your time, guys. You can see our white sill stripe. Those I soak in water as well. Just makes them a little bit more easier to work with. And just taking my time and putting the decals on a little bit at a time here. And so we got our decals on, we got a clear coat. Now I'm going to come back with a little bit of a wash here. This is a black wash. I went with a very light weathering on this locomotive because it was released into service in like early 99, so I didn't need to make it too dirty, so I just went with some black washes here on the grills just to dirt it up a little bit. Nothing too crazy, just a little bit on all these grills. And you can see that the first round I did with it, I wasn't too happy with, so I came back with some black acrylic paint and I went with that. I think this is like airbrush paint, so it was very thin if I'm remembering correctly, but it was just what I was looking for to go in these grills to darken them up. But that was the extent of the weathering on this locomotive. I didn't get too crazy. I mean, other than that, I painted the couplers. That was about it. But as always, guys, I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video.